Item C, approval of 2021-2022 annual school budget.
Well, I'm at a loss. I'm looking at all the different configurations that I have of the budget. Apparently, if I understand this right, our budget with the changes that were made to this one tonight is increased over last year about $2.4 million. And it's increased, 1.3 million from the one that we got in the packet originally. And how's this set with the funding body when we said that we saved $3 million by closing 2 schools? I mean, where's that $3 million at?
There's not $3 million saved at the point that it's closed. There were $3 million in savings for anticipated maintenance projects, if you look at that funding study, on those 2 school sites over the next several years. Roofing, restructure, sewer plant replacement, HVAC upgrades, depending on the school. And if you factored in all of those long-term maintenance projects, that's where the $3 million, 1.5 for each school site came in. Now, operational costs, as we explained in the budget committee meeting several weeks ago, you're looking at about $28,000 per school annually that we're gonna save. Plus, we use staff from those school sites to fill staffing positions through attrition. Those that retired, those that left the system. So we're not increasing staffing year to date, so there is a savings there, as well as the principal retirement that we were funding out of local funds at both locations. So we had those up. There was an anticipated total of about $800,000 of operational cost savings if you include staffing and maintenance and operations.
For both schools?
Correct.
Yeah. So, but all of the reporting that you read and everything you read, that $3 million figure keeps jumping up.
Well, I just
And the bottom line is this: we haven't spent any money much on those schools anyway since I've been on the board. I don't know. The only thing I remember we done in Kessler was redone the kitchen floor that I remember doing major. And so I don't remember right off the top of my head what that cost factor was. So if we never had spent that money, we're not really saving that money. I mean, that money was never expended to begin with.
That's why there was a difference between the $3 million you quoted as a potential savings and what we were actually saving in operations and staffing. That's why I clarified that.
Well, I mean, and that's critical, because to me, I mean, you know, that the money, it's money. And I mean, you gotta be realistic as to how much that actually is, because somebody's gonna question that beyond me, I think.
So with the unknowns and an agile annual budget projection, as you know, I don't like presenting a budget that's 5.9 to the deficit. I don't like presenting a budget last year that was 4.3 to the deficit. I don't like presenting a draft earlier that was 4.6 several weeks ago. But the board asked us to do 2 things. One is clean up every salary schedule and try to retain our employees and at a competitive pay rate, and I think we've done that. If prior to last night, if you compared what we drafted and proposed to you several weeks ago compared to last year's budget proposal, it was an increase of about $1 million. So if you figure that all the work that was done in the budget, in the salary scale cleanup, and making sure we were competitive, and making sure that we broke out our administrative salary schedules and all the things that you asked us to do, we were basically, for intents and purposes, considering inflation, flat funded last year to this year. Now, last night occurred. We could have easily backed those back to account for, except for our teachers, but we wanted to be fair and equitable across all attached salary scales that play off of our teachers' salaries. And therefore, that comes at a little bit of a cost. Now, if you look at what we budgeted last year, we were basically $4.3 million for 2021. Our actuals, when they're said and done, and there was a mistake at the outside of the county school system, in essence, we were $500,000 deficit, not 4.1 million. That's a big difference. We overestimate our expenditures and we underestimate our revenues. And we do that for a purpose, so that we set ourselves up for covering what we have to cover in an operational budget. Now, would I like to be tighter and not present a 5.9 to the deficit? Absolutely. But considering the work that's gone into these salary schedules and what we need to do to protect our recruitment and retention for our county, I do recommend the budget as proposed, even though Melissa worked very, very hard to update that per the state minimum today, and I don't agree with that timing one bit. We would have liked to have more time with that, but it is what it is, and we meet those targets now, along with what the board set for us in drafting this year's budget.
I would, I make a motion that we approve the budget for 2021, 2022 annual school budget.
I second.
Debbie got it. Is there any further discussion?
I will say one other thing. 2.5
As amended.
as amended.
But
number
you got
one.
2 copies
As
in
amended,
there.
as amended. Number two, I do want to say that we were encouraged by our commission, and specifically our budget committee, several years ago, when they looked at our fund balance and they knew what we were paying our staff. And Mr. Metz at the time was chairman of that committee, and he looked at me as a new incoming director and he said, we would have rather you used your fund balance to increase teacher pay than wind up with a large fund balance. We've been able to protect that fund balance and not deficit spend for now 3 consecutive budgets while increasing salaries, protecting our staff, and creating creative incentives to keep our staff and incentivize employment within Hawkins County at little or zero cost. This year we are stepping up a little bit, but it's much, much needed. And I do hear where Mr. Hicks is coming from and where the concern is, but we have to step up if we're going to attract and keep the best for our students. And what you see here, although you're talking 5.9 million, that's 10% of our overall budget.
But were we at about 12 million undesignated fund balance before this budget?
We're 11.6.
I'd say right at 12.
Yeah.
That was with
Yep.
the 1920. Of
That
course,
was the last one.
2021 is in the process of being
Because it's not-
audited
I
currently.
mean,
It's not
this
over.
budget here is right at, well, it is over $6 million that you're taking in both general purpose and transportation, right?
But each fund has a
I
fund
know
balance.
that, I know that. I'm aware of that.
But you
but
can't
when
add
you throw it all
transportation in there.
It's kind of like me having 3 checking accounts. It really only one group of money when you get right down to it.
That-
But
that-
you can't cross fund out of those funds. That's
I realize that. Well, you know, there's a potential of always doing transfers and anything, but overall, it's like over $6 million, even though transportation has their own funds, cafeteria has their own, general purpose has their own. But I mean, $5.9 million, that's almost 6.
What I would say is though, historically speaking, look at what we've projected and what we've actually drawn from.
Oh, I know, I understand that. And that's a part of having the information as.
Is there any more pertinent discussion to the vote on the budget? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes.